all the old sewing projects. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new around here and don't know who I am, my name is Madison. I'm an Instagram creator, high school fashion design teacher, and here on YouTube I film sewing videos and tutorials along with other fashion related content to share my love and passion for fashion with you all. I'm so excited that you're tuning into today's video because I am very excited about it. I am going to be showing, discussing, talking about, and rating some of my old sewing project. So let's dive in. This is a video that I honestly am doing because a couple of people suggested it and I thought it was such a good idea, and for the longest time I thought I wasn't going to be able to do this because I didn't know where all of these old projects were, and there's quite frankly many old projects that I really don't have anymore, or if I do I just absolutely have no clue where they are. But when I was flipping my closet for spring recently, I realized that at the bottom of all these storage crates were all of these old sewing projects of pieces that really don't fit my style anymore, that I don't integrate into my wardrobe by season, but that I could never get rid of because they're literally my sewing projects, and it's really hard to get rid of things that I made, especially things that I made back in like middle school, high school, college, all that stuff. So that's what we are going to be diving into today. I'm honestly really excited to be talking about these because they just bring back so many memories and remind me why I love to sew and why I love fashion and making my own clothes. So I feel like before we start we kind of have to backtrack it and rewind to how I got into sewing in the first place and kind of my backstory and history with learning how to sew and learning to make my own clothes. So let's start at the very beginning. I feel like starting off my story talking about my history and my story with learning how to sew. I feel like I just basically am gonna say I've been sewing for basically my entire life, because I kind of feel like I have, granted like the first part of my life I honestly like have no recollection and memory of, but from my earliest remembering I always remember creating things, and a lot of that had to do with sewing. Before I ever learned to even sew on a sewing machine, I was always creating and making things by hand. I remember myself and two of my good friends hand sewing an entire quilt for one of my friend's grandmothers who was sick, and that was such a cool experience. And I think I also, in addition to that quilt, made like 1 or 2 baby quilts all sewn by hand as well. So yeah, that's the whole process, sewing something by hand. And so I feel like all of this hand stitching really got me into sewing back in the day when I was growing up in like middle school. But then I really got into sewing itself and wanting to make my own clothes and needing the tools to do that. And so one year, probably when I was in middle school, maybe like 6th or 7th grade, I got one of the mini sewing machines for Christmas, and I was so happy about it. And that's really how I started to learn how to sew. My mom's mom is a really skilled seamstress. She made a lot of my mom's clothes growing up. She made a lot of her own clothes, and so she kind of gave me the crash course on how to use a sewing machine, how to follow a pattern, kind of the ins and outs of sewing. But needless to say, within about 6 months I kind of outgrew that sewing machine because it really did not live up to all of the projects that I was wanting to make, and I also really didn't sew fast enough for my patience level. And so I ended up starting to use this old Brother sewing machine probably from around the 70s, and I used that all the way up until high school, and then I upgraded to my basic Janome machine, and then now I've upgraded again to a different Janome. But a lot of my sewing experience comes from later years elementary hand sewing, and then a majority middle school and high school when I really got into it and started to learn a lot of things for myself. Like I said, my grandmother is a really skilled seamstress, so she taught me a lot. My mom taught me a lot as well, and helped me to learn how to read a pattern and make things by following the directions of the pattern. But once I kind of got the basics, I kind of just took off on my own, which tends to be my learning style. I'm very much a hands-on and visual learner, so if I see someone do something or see pictures with directions, most likely I'm going to pick it up very quickly and then want to try to kind of figure it out along the way. I very much learn by doing and learn by making mistakes, and that is truly the motto of me as a seamstress, is to just make mistakes and learn from it. One of my favorite quotes is by Miss Frizzle when she says, "Take chances, make mistakes, and get messy," and I wholeheartedly live by that quote in life as a creator, as a seamstress, and also as a teacher, and always try to emphasize that fact with all of my students, that making mistakes you actually learn a lot from, and I can attest to the fact that I've learned a lot over the years by making many mistakes when it came to sewing. So needless to say, I started off hand sewing. I started to sew on a mini sewing machine, then I upgraded to a sewing machine and really just took off from there, teaching myself along the way, using patterns. The weird thing is that back when I was first starting to learn how to sew in middle school and high school, YouTube was around, but I really didn't use YouTube at all compared to how much I use it today to learn the things I learned. So if I would have utilized all of these tutorials back then, I probably would have learned way more when I was in high school. So most of it really just came by trying different patterns and learning how to integrate different technical aspects into every project that I made, and really learning along the way, learning by reading things, learning by people showing me, and then when I really learned the ins and outs of technical sewing, creating your own patterns, everything like that, was when I was in college and took a introduction to sewing and design class, and then a pattern making class, and that's where I got all of my technical skills that I use a lot in my videos now. So that's kind of the backstory to how I kind of started to sew and got into sewing, but it really just came from my deep-hearted desire of loving to create, loving to make things for myself, loving to make things for other people, and the pride that comes from making something and getting to wear it and getting to say, oh yeah, I made this dress, which is really cool. Also, I'm a very tall person, and so growing up in high school, I was never able to find things that really fit me very well or that were long enough, and so for me, that's why I oftentimes sewed my own dresses, because I knew that they would actually be long enough for my taste, and I also had weird vintage taste back then, so I just like to make things that no one else would literally wear. So yeah. So as I go all through, gotta change the battery. Alright, so let's dive into all of these old sewing projects. Now, when I say old sewing projects, I don't really mean like my first original trial and error projects, because I don't really know where all of these are, but these are some fantastic projects from when I was really getting into sewing, and so you'll kind of see kind of all of the different levels of what I was interested in and the techniques I was learning along the way. But I thought it'd be fun to kind of show you all, I guess, kind of how far I've come over the years, and the fact that you too, no matter what level of sewing you're at, if you're just now getting started, if you've been sewing for years, the fact that one, sewing is amazing. It's an incredible skill, it's an incredible hobby, it's so rewarding, but also I love seeing everyone's story of sewing, like where they started, their old projects, and where they are today. So I thought I would share my story with you all. So we're gonna dive in, trying to decide where I want to start off on. I think I'm going to start with the project that I think is the earliest out of this whole bunch of projects, and I honestly think I was probably 10 or 11 whenever I made this dress. But this is the dress. It is this satiny purple fabric, but it also has like a plaid checkerish print, because in the fabric there's like this pink kind of checkered weave. Has puff sleeves, lace on the edges, no lace on the bottom, it's just hemmed, and a zipper in the back. So the backstory for this, back in the day, Walmart used to have this fantastic wall of $1 a yard fabrics. Now they still have like dollar a yard fabrics, but the quality is atrocious compared to what it used to be. And I got this fabric off of the $1 a yard, and so I made this dress. It has gathers. You can't really see super closely on the camera from where I'm holding it up, but the zipper is definitely off center in the back. You can definitely see some of the gathers that weren't caught very well, but for like an 11 or 12-year-old to make this with the help of my mom, I'm pretty impressed by this. I mean, I have interfacing in the neckline, I used a zigzag stitch, I sewed in a zipper, so this turned out pretty well. I also made a sash to go with it. And a fun fact for this dress, I had my twin doll growing up. I never had an American Girl doll, even though I grew up reading all the American Girl doll books, but I had my twin doll, which meant it was a doll that was made to look like you. And so I made her a matching dress to this, and then we went to a tea party, and yeah, it's fabulous. If I find the picture, I will put it in this video, if I can find it somewhere. But this is probably one of my earliest sewing projects, and I'm also honestly pretty impressed with the fact that my 11 or 12-year-old self actually made this. So if this is any indication of the projects that I was bound to make in the future, sewing wise, this is it. Okay, next up, I am gonna start with this piece. It is this fabulous blue cotton dress, because I feel like this was an earlier piece that I had made sometime in high school when I was kind of getting into pattern making, but also when I was really getting into vintage. So I remember always going online and doing research into different styles. I was like literally super into vintage in high school, and I'm pretty sure I did make this in high school. And so I love the 1950s. I still love the 1950s, and so I wanted a dress that was very reminiscent of the 1950s, but I didn't have a pattern, so obviously I drafted it. So we have the bodice of this dress. It has these darts right here. It has this wide waistband, and then it has a gathered skirt. And I based this off of a 1950s dress that I found a picture of, and then I kind of just drafted my own dress. There's definitely a lot of rough pieces to this dress, like my sleeves weren't long enough or my straps weren't long enough, so I had to basically Frankenstein it and add like these extra sections. The darts in the front were definitely not long enough, so I was only able to wear this like a year. It probably would fit now, except that it would be like super tight and like a corset around the bust. And funniest story with this dress is I'm 99.9% certain that when I first made this, I made it without a zipper, which when I was like trying to maneuver myself into it and just like squeeze it over my head, without a zipper and a fitted waist. But then I ended up adding in a zipper later on down the road. So this is definitely a really fun dress that I drafted myself. I know I didn't watch a video for this, so I'm pretty sure I was just basing it off of what I thought the shapes were supposed to look like, and this is how it turned out. Pretty great 1950s vintage. So honestly, I'm pretty proud of that. Okay, most of the rest of the projects I have on this table are based off of patterns. Now, I did a lot of like self-drafting when I was growing up sewing, but I also use a lot of patterns. A lot of my favorite patterns were the Project Runway patterns. I can't remember if they're put out by Simplicity or McCall's. I feel like they're put out by Simplicity. They still make them today, but the reason that I love their Project Runway patterns, once Project Runway, how can you not anything branded? How can you not love anything branded Project Runway? But two, they gave you a lot of freedom in your design, so they would always give you multiple different sleeves, bodices, or skirts that you could integrate into your design. So you basically picked all of the different design elements you want, and then you could sew it together to create the perfect like dress or top or whatever it was. So a lot of the dresses that I made in high school were based off of these like two patterns that I would make multiple times because I just loved the style and was familiar with it. And so I have two of those dresses today. So first up is this dress. This is made out of the dollar fabric from Walmart when the quality dropped a lot. But it's a really pretty color, and it is a very classic style and silhouette that I wore with a peach cardigan and little white Oxford shoes to be all vintage. It has a zipper, all that stuff. The quality is not the best, but this was probably a like sophomore high school outfit dress. And so I made a couple of dresses that were this style based off of the Project Runway pattern. This was one of them. Another Project Runway pattern is this dress. So this is a dress that I made for Easter one year. I remember going and getting the fabric at Joann Fabrics, and it's this fun rosy pink and yellow and peach print. It has this awesome like cutout in the back, and then this is Velcro that velcros across, and then there's an invisible zipper, but not sewn the correct way because I didn't know how to do invisible zippers back then, so you can still see it. My armholes are lined with like a bias tape that I made, and the front is like this boxy front. So the bodice of this has princess seams that go all the way into pleats all the way around the dress. So it's a very interesting cut and silhouette, and then it has these two pieces which actually like crisscross in the front, and so it's this like kind of cool wrap effect. So this was definitely a really cool dress. The front apparently didn't fit me very well, so I had to like retake it in because it was too wide across the front. One downside of sewing with commercial patterns is that if you follow the directions for sewing the size that your measurements align with, Most of the time I have to tweak and adapt things because it wouldn't actually fit like I wanted it to. But this was a super fun dress that I made for Easter when I was in high school. I feel like I was a sophomore, maybe. There's that dress based on a Project Runway pattern. Super fun. Okay, which one do we want to go with next? Let's do the shorts that are made out of the same fabric, because why not matchy matchy? So here we go. A high-waisted pair of shorts with front pleats, back darts, a back zipper, and then hook and eyes on the waist, and then also the edge that's folded up with a little cuff. So these are some super comfy and very vintagey spring inspired shorts. These are actually based off of, I believe, a 1950s vintage pattern, or it could have been like a 1980s, but it's definitely, I know it's based off of a vintage pattern, shorts pattern that I made, shorts pattern that I had and then made into shorts. So this is actually one of the pairs of shorts that I made based off of that pattern, and I'll show you the other pair of shorts. So yeah, these turned out pretty well. Back in the day, I didn't really do seam finishes on all of my seams because I didn't have a serger, and I didn't really do zigzags, but I'm pretty impressed with how these turned out. Shorts and pants are always a little tricky sometimes. You kind of never know how they're going to turn out, so they're not too bad. Also, back then I did use a lot of zippers, but I didn't really know how to put in your regular zipper like how I do now if you've watched any of my videos with zippers. And so these are what my zippers look like. You could always see them, which it's no big deal if you put it in zippers this way, but I like to put them in now where I really don't see my zippers. So I always felt very accomplished when I put in zippers in high school because they just seemed like such a hard thing to me, but now I know that they're actually way easier, and the method I use now is actually way easier than this method. So this pair of shorts, here's the other pair of shorts that I made. These fun pinstripe shorts made out of this fun red and white striped fabric. So I actually adapted the waistband for the pattern so that it had kind of this peak in the front, and they had like an extra vintage vibe. These are honestly very long, but again, like I said, I am a very tall person with long legs, and so finding things that were long enough has always been my #1 challenge in life, and I love vintage style things, so I've always liked longer shorts and very high-waisted styles of shorts. So we have these shorts with a very popping red zipper in the back, very visible, but I remember wearing this all the time growing up with like these fun white blouses, vintagey sunglasses, white sandals, and I just thought I was like this 1940s movie star. This was also very much in my Taylor Swift phase of high school, where basically all of my hairstyles revolved around every single different hairstyle that she got. So the vintage shorts based off of a vintage pattern. All right, we are going to continue the theme of this striped fabric because I have a jacket that I made in this same fabric, but it was blue. So at this point, I have no clue if I'm going in order of which ones I made earliest and latest. So we're just gonna be all over the place with this. So aside from these shorts, this is honestly the piece that it still blows my mind today that in high school, I honestly think I was a freshman or sophomore when I made this jacket, that I made this structured jacket based off of a vintage pattern. So this is the jacket, complete with collar, with fitted darts in the front and seams with buttons, buttonholes. The buttons are these little silver sailor print buttons. Super fun. You have your sleeves, you have like your lining on the inside of the neck, which is top stitched. You have all of this lining at the bottom. Like, it still blows my mind today that I decided to make this. And as much as I feel like I made this in high school, there's a good possibility that I could have made this in 8th grade. 8th grade, like middle school and high school honestly like blend together in my mind sometimes. And so I don't even know when I made half of these. But we have this jacket, one, because I've always been obsessed with stripes. I've always been a huge fan of any of like the nautical sailor styles, but I honestly think that my greatest inspiration for this jacket was all of the old Disney Channel shows, like Wizards of Waverly Place, Hannah Montana, Shake It Up, like all of the shows, like Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, because blazers were a really big deal back then style wise, and then like vests over things, and so I always wanted to like dress trendy like that. But for me, I wasn't gonna go out and buy these jackets, and if I found them at a store, they weren't in my budget. So I decided to make them. I honestly don't think I wore this jacket all that much, but still very impressed with it, and I know I used a vintage pattern for this. So the fact that I just kind of dove into making this still really impresses me today. I've only ever made one other jacket, and that was last year for an 1800s walking outfit. So if you go watch I wore historical costumes to school for a week. It was my Friday outfit. It was a very similar jacket to this. Jackets are honestly one of my least favorite things to make, so pretty impressed that I decided to kind of make this, and I honestly learned so much along the way by making this jacket. Okay, next up, what should we do? Let's go with a skirt that I made myself, self-drafted without a pattern. The great thing about skirts is a lot of skirts you can easily make without a pattern, and you don't even have to have a sloper necessarily, because it's just based off of measurements and squares or rectangles of fabric. Then you gather it or pleat it, make a waistband, and boom, you've got a skirt. So this was one of those skirts that, again, I'm pretty sure I made this in high school, but at this point I don't even remember. One of the skirts, it's this lavender and white striped. It's absolutely beautiful. I love these colors, and I wore it so much in high school. It also has this detachable bow, because, you know, bows are great on everything, and to make it detachable you can change up the style on this. So here we have it. We have all of my pleats that I made across the front, and then the back also has the same thing, all the pleats, and then the waistband had to be have darts added into it because apparently it didn't fit. And then we got that nice pop of a purple zipper again, because I didn't know how to put zippers in where they are concealed. But that's okay. From the front, this dress looks good. From the back, we just embrace it. And I honestly thought I was like so stylish in this, and it was such a fun spring and summer skirt because it was very classic, very like trendy in a way, but also just a fun color and a fun style. So there's that skirt that I made. Alright, next up, let's dive into something else that was self-drafted. Honestly, I feel like the story behind this dress is so cool. Like I said, I got a lot of my inspiration from going online, looking at brands, the styles of brands that I liked, but I never really would have gone out and bought or could have afforded, etc. And so I remember in high school one day wanting to find some kind of inspiration for a project and getting online, and I think I was just researching like retro or vintage inspired clothes, and I found the fabulous brand ModCloth. I still love ModCloth clothes, but I really don't buy from them anymore just because I don't like their production process necessarily. But ModCloth is a super classic brand that focuses on kind of reimagining vintage pieces and silhouettes. And so I remember literally sitting on their website for an hour scrolling through all of their designs, falling in love with all of them, and just thinking, oh my gosh, I want to buy everything on this website, but also knowing that I could never afford it. And so I picked out some pieces that I wanted to try and replicate, because my goal that day was to get inspiration for making a garment for myself. And so this is the dress that we ended up making. It's a super basic dress, but I remember the dress itself off of ModCloth had the sleeves like this. So there's basically no sleeve sewn into this dress. It's just a square that you cinch in at the waist, and then it has buttons, and the original dress has buttons as well. So I remember trying to figure out how to draft this, and I know that I basically just drafted like this giant square, cut a neck hole, cut armholes, finished them, put in elastic, and then sewed in these buttons in the front. Although the thing about this dress is that there's only elastic in the front, and then across the back on the sides there's no elastic, because that was how the original dress was. And I feel like this was a dress that I was super proud of because it was very in trend at the time, and yeah, I just really like it. I'm always proud to like look back at the things that I somehow was able to create and kind of figure out how to make. It's just so cool, and speaks to the fact that if you understand the basics of sewing and fashion, you're able to take that knowledge and really break it apart to understand how to make things for yourself that you might not be able to go out and buy. So here's this dress. Definitely a super fun summery dress that I wore for a couple of years, and then it kind of went out of style, so it's in my vault of my collection of past pieces. Alright, next up is another piece that I also self-drafted, and this one is near and dear to my heart because it's another piece that I, to this day, am still really surprised that I was able to figure out the pattern for. And so this dress is based off of a dress from Anthropologie. I've never actually like shopped at Anthropologie, but I've always loved their styles because I thought they were unique. But my favorite thing about Anthropologie was how they kind of told a story with their clothes. If you've ever looked through an Anthropologie magazine, their magazines are like immaculate. How they do their photo shoots, they will always travel usually to different places around the world, these very interesting settings, and really had this really interesting photo shoot to showcase their clothes in a unique way. And so in high school, I actually signed up to get their magazines. I still think you can go on their website and sign up to get their magazines and their catalogs. And I got them because I, one, wanted to see all the different styles, and two, I wanted to see how they were doing their photo shoots and kind of setting up this whole kind of story behind their clothes. And so I remember this super fun summery dress that I saw in the magazine, and I was like, I want to make that. And I know there's another Anthropologie dress that I made. I just don't think I have it anymore. And it was another dress that I absolutely love. But here's the dress that I made. This is made out of the $1 a yard fabric from Walmart, and it's like some like dreadful polyester blend. This again was when the quality for their fabric went down the hill. But I'm gonna hold it up because you can see it's gathered in the front right here. It has ruffles across the top. It has this bodice part with darts. Then it has this waistband. Then it's pleated. It has sleeves, and then this is the back. And then you have the skirt. And somehow I was able to look at this picture and kind of just figure out, okay, how am I going to create this pattern? And I remember pulling out all my newspapers, because I would use newspapers to draft all of my patterns, and figuring out all the logistics of how the shape would work for this dress. And putting this together, we have these sleeves, but they're also pleated, so you can actually open them up and kind of wear them more on your shoulder if you want a little bit more coverage. So it's kind of a dual dress. So yeah, I loved the print for this because I loved kind of the khaki and cream color along with the really vibrant pink roses. And then I've always loved the bodice of this. And I've never ever made another dress with this kind of bodice. So I kind of almost really want to try to replicate this today with more technique and see how it turns out, because it's just such a fun dress. So this was probably, honestly, I feel like this was like sophomore year of high school. But it could have been junior year. But I feel like I didn't sew all that many things junior and senior year of high school as I did like freshman and sophomore year. So there's that dress. Okay, we only have a couple more things left, so let's look at what we want to talk about next. Here is this skirt. It honestly looks like it's made out of a blanket. It's not, but I'm pretty sure this is made out of a tablecloth that we got from my neighbor, and I wanted just kind of like something fun and vibrant and bright. It's not hemmed at the bottom because it just has like the raw finished edge that the fabric came with. So it's this really interesting, like almost hand loom woven type of fabric with these vibrant stripes. So it's again one of my go-to ways of making skirts back in the day, is to create a square or a rectangle of fabric and then gather up the waist or put some type of pleats in it. This dress just features a center front pleat, and then you don't get another pleat until the back where the zipper is. So it's kind of an interesting style detail of just having that pleat in the front, then a waistband, and then this fabulous, once again, orange zipper at the back. So this was a dress that I wore throughout the summer for a couple of years. All right, next up are two vintage blouses based off of vintage patterns. Again, like I said, in high school, I was all about the vintage, especially junior and senior year. I basically looked like someone from the 1940s or 1950s, complete with like T-strap shoes, sweater sets, wool skirts, pin curls, tights, like you name it. I looked like I was from the 1950s and 40s, but I loved it, and I feel like that time of my life gave me so much confidence for who I am today, and it really gave me my love of vintage. So I had a lot of vintage patterns that I was always looking at for inspiration and for different projects that I either got from my grandmother, people gave to me, or I got from yard sales and things like that. So I remember there being this vintage pattern with this very kind of office style blouse where it has like a tie neck, and these nice puffy sleeves. And so this was the first top that I made based off of that pattern. So there's little cuffs on the sleeve. It has no zippers anywhere. You just fit it over your head. It has this fabric around the neckline, and then it ties in the front. And then it has darts at the shoulders. So I had this kind of striped satiny fabric lying around, and I made this shirt because this is a very like businessy 50s style shirt, and it was based off of a vintage pattern. So yeah, this was a really fun top to make, and I loved it enough that I made another one, but in an even crazier print. This is honestly like the clown shirt because it's just crazy enough of a print. And I'm pretty sure that this fabric was from my great aunt, who I've gotten a lot of fabric from over the years and have made a lot of projects from. So here we go. It's kind of this polyester acetate satiny fabric, vibrant pink polka dots and white. So again, you have the tie neckline right here, and for this neckline I actually hand stitched it all down on the inside so that there wouldn't be any seams on the outside. And then this one also, the cuffs are where you can open them, and they actually have a button. So this one features a buttonhole and buttons right here on the side. So I believe that this top I actually made like junior year of high school, or it could have been senior year. I was really big into these very retro businessy type tops or sweaters worn with black singed at the waist skirts that were like midi, like 1950s shape and style. So this was one of those tops that I tended to wear a lot. All right, another piece from high school is more of like a redesign piece rather than a I completely made it myself. But again, like I've said, shorts and dresses are always hard to fit on to me, and so I would have to adapt things or make my own. So I adapted these shorts one year to be worn in a festive way for 4th of July. So I think I thrifted these shorts somewhere, or I got them as hand-me-downs, but they're, I believe, an 80s brand. So they kind of have this fitted front waist and then an elastic back, and they were too short for me, or just too short for my liking. They really weren't drastically short, but I wanted to add a little bit of length to them. So I ended up taking some eyelet lace that I had and layering it over itself and then sewing it onto the bottom, and it made this super fun pair of shorts that I actually like wore a couple of years ago for 4th of July. So this was a fun like redesign project that I did. All right, 3 more projects. One of these I know that I did in high school, and the other 2 I think I did in high school as well. So yeah, not a ton of early sewing projects. If I ever come across those one day, I will by all means make another video so you can see like how crazy those early sewing projects were. But this was a dress from high school, I do believe. I really don't think I made this one in college. I'm pretty sure I made this like junior or senior year of high school. So it's this print. It's a very old and dated print, but there's this really cool story behind the print that I didn't realize until like 3 years after I had made it. Honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like I made this dress, I was gonna say in college, but no, it was high school because I started taking dual credit college classes my junior year of high school. So like high school and college overlap my last 2 years. So it's based off of the silhouette of many of my dresses from back in the day, kind of your A-line-ish style dresses, either with gathered skirts or fitted skirts, but just front darts, back darts, a back zipper, and it's a very go-to style, especially if you like classic styles. So this was one of my go-to patterns, but I added a little bit of, you know, emphasis to it by adding this scalloped detail to the front and then putting all of these blue buttons down the front. So that's a super fun detail. And I made my own light blue, dusty blue piping to go along the armholes and the neckline to just give it a much more crisp and clean style. And now that I'm looking at this, I realized that however I drafted this, I must have drafted it or cut it or sewn it too small, because I had to go back in and add panels to the sides of this bodice so that it would actually fit. But because of all the crazy stripes, you can't really tell. And finally, I learned how to put in zippers the correct way for a concealed zipper. So here we go. You can barely tell it's there because it has the little overlaps, and then you just have the khaki zipper. So there's this dress. Now, fun story about this pattern of this fabric. I'm pretty sure this was fabric that my mom just had in a fabric stash and I asked to use, and so I made it because, again, it's very dated. It really is not my typical print whatsoever, but I guess this was the only fabric I had lying around, so I made it into a dress. And then, like a year later, I was watching Anne of Green Gables, the Anne of Green Gables where it has like 3 movies, really the classic Anne of Green Gables that we all know and love. And in the first Anne of Green Gables there's a scene where Anne is in the kitchen washing the dishes. I think Marilla comes in to tell her something, or it's the part where she gets the dress with puff sleeves, something where Anne's in the kitchen. And I remember watching that scene and going, there's no way that that fabric is the exact same fabric as my dress, because it looked so familiar to me. And so I paused it and I started looking at it, and it was the exact same fabric. So the fabric used to make one of Anne's 1800s dresses in the first Anne of Green Gables is the same fabric. So I could never get rid of this dress, because this dress just reminds me of Anne of Green Gables and Avonlea, and I will always love it because of that. And actually I did like a photo shoot wearing this dress and wearing a hat and holding a book of poems that's referenced to Anne of Green Gables on my blog back in the day. So there's that. If I find the link, I'll maybe try and link it down below. So yes, almost done. We have one more piece to talk about, and then that's it for all of the pieces I could search around and find for this video talking about all of my old sewing projects. Oh, two more projects left. I feel like these were made late high school, early college, so they're not super old sewing projects, but I've definitely come a long ways since then. And like I said, if I do more scrounging around and digging, I'll probably find more pieces, and we'll film another rating my old sewing projects video. So here's this dress. I actually have this style of dress in two different prints, because after I made this one, I love the style so much that I made it in another print, which is actually in my All My Homemade Dress Collection video. It's like the candy colored striped dress. So it is this dress right here. It's this light blue kind of novel, not really novelty-ish pattern, but just kind of this little interesting design pattern. And so I made it to kind of be inspired by the 1940s, because the 1940s had a lot of very interesting prints of fabric, and it's also based off of a 1940s dress. So to create this dress, I actually used a 1940s reproduction bodice pattern that had this style of bodice, and then I just cut out and attached a skirt to it to turn it into a dress. And I did the same thing for the other dress I made from this exact same style. And then my favorite thing about this dress is these cute little pink buttons on the dress, which were a gift from a friend in high school, kind of like a mentor who knew I loved to sew, and she also loved to sew, and I had held on to them for years and years trying to find a project to put them on, and it worked out perfectly on this dress. So there we have it. It's not lined or anything. If I went back and redid it, I would definitely line it. And in the other dress that I did, I actually self-lined the bodice. That way you wouldn't have to like wear a tank top, or you could feel more comfortable. But there's that one. And then the last one is this fun little tiered skirt that I made. It's very rough, not the best at all, but I guess I just got really inspired one day and wanted to have like a tiered kind of skirt. So it's definitely like circle skirts that are layered onto themselves, but the stripes are kind of all over the place if you look at the front and the back based on how I cut it. So it's very interesting. But you have a fitted waist, and then you have like the lining part and the zipper and the back and the hook and eye. And I feel like I also made like a yellow top to go with this. I just didn't pull it out for this video. So that's kind of the last piece. I really only wore this skirt like one time, but again, I've never gotten rid of it because it's part of my collection of all of my pieces throughout the years. So I think that is it for this installment of talking about all my old projects. And I just realized that I was going to call this video rating all my old projects, and I didn't rate any of these. I'm pretty biased though, so I would say most of these are in like the 6 to 10 range. I feel like none of them are super low, because I either used a pattern for it or I made my own pattern and made it look somewhat accurate to what I was trying to go with. So we're gonna say all of these are like in the 6 to 10 range. But if you wanted to take a stab at rating all of these, pick an item that I talked about in this video and tell me what you would rate it based on the story behind it, the color, the style, the print, the technique, whatever it is. I would love to hear your ratings on whichever piece was your favorite. And also tell me what piece was your favorite from this video down in the comments. I would love to hear from you which one you liked out of all of these projects, because they really were all over the place with style. But that is it for today's video, sharing and talking about all of my old sewing projects. I would love to hear from you on your backstory of how you got into sewing and why you love it, and maybe what your favorite old sewing project is, and stay tuned. If we find any more of the old sewing projects, we will definitely be filming a new video. But thank you all so much for watching today, for sticking around to see all of these pieces, hear my backstory and history of how I got into sewing and why I love it so much, why this channel means so much to me, and why I love sharing my story and my passion for fashion and sewing with you all. So if you like what you saw today, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and if you aren't already subscribed to my channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on new projects and videos in the future. And without further ado, we're gonna sign off on this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.